Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. As I mentioned before, I didn't take a step backwards quick enough when they asked for volunteers to do a talk at the Orchid Society based on orchids you can grow in the home and how you might look after them. So I got volunteered basically. What follows is the talk. Now when this talk is done for real, it will just be the video, no sound. I'll do the sound like for real, live as they say. But what I've done is I've played it and recorded a soundtrack and added it to the video so that you can have a look at it and a listen to it and see what you think. The idea is that you imagine you've arrived at your Orchid Society, got yourself in a comfy chair, if they provide one, and you know, somebody's introduced the speaker and this is what you get. I get allocated 45 minutes with some time for questions afterwards, and that's the idea. What I'm after from you guys is, firstly, is it okay? Would you sit through it without walking out and going and have a cigarette outside or finding a bar? You know, that sort of thing. Is it okay? And can you keep your eye out for spelling mistakes and things like that? Because it's a video piece of software that's not capable of doing a spell check. And although I'm not bad at looking at that sort of thing, I may have missed a few items. So keep your eye out for spelling mistakes. If you spot anything like that, you know, in actual words or those sort of things, you'll need to give me a time that the problem occurs in. You know, so like a minutes and seconds. You get that at the bottom of the video anyway, so it's not difficult. So leave me a comment with the time, you know, minutes and seconds, what the problem is, the word that's spelt wrong, and preferably the correct spelling. Save me doing some flipping work. So that's the idea. The video is virtually 45 minutes long. You may need a comfy chair, some wine, some tea, some coffee, but the idea is to imagine you're at your Orchid Society and this is the talk given by the speaker. And would it be okay aimed at people who grow their orchids in the home, and the sort of orchids you can get readily available that you might start a collection with before you get totally hooked like this idiot here. So here we go. Thank you for that marvellous introduction. Now all I've got to do is live up to it. I was asked to do this talk based around the sort of orchids you can grow in your home and they'll be reasonably happy there. So that's what this is about, sort of orchids you can grow in your home and how you might want to look after them. It's about a beginner's tale really. Everybody has to start somewhere, and this is really my story of moving from one orchid at college, I was the only one, to where I am now, which is effectively totally certifiable, according to my family anyway. So I'll be looking into a bit of history, how I got where I am, some science and chemistry in a basic form, and then we'll have a look at some of the orchid types and chat about some care to go with them. Okay, so where did it all start for me? Well, it started a very long time ago when a man used to walk in front of the car with a red flag. But seriously, college for me was a long time ago. Most people hadn't heard of orchids in those days, but seriously, this is where most of us started. Most of us had a white phalaenopsis, which we didn't even know what it was called, in a white pot, probably as a present from a friend or something. Trouble is, this often happens with your first one, brown bread. For one reason or another, we're not always successful. And hopefully by the end of this talk we can have more successes than losses. That's where I am now. So then it begins, and you start getting a few more of these store-bought orchids in white pots. You might even have found out what they're called by now, but the collection has sort of begun. And then all of a sudden, all of your windowsills look like that. And your family think you're nuts, your partner and your pets disown you, and your partner may even move out of the house because there's no room left for them. That's how it can end, trust me. So the time has passed where you can seek help, basically. And it's said that crazy people don't know they're crazy. I know I'm crazy, therefore I'm not crazy. And then you get a grow room. And that's where I am now, with many different genera, all struggling to survive in a similar environment. Some do well, some not so well, but that's how I ended up certifiable. Right, a bit of history and a few jokes. We've done that bit now. Let's get on to some very basic science and chemistry, and I really am going to keep this basic. I could do a whole talk on this. I could do 45 minutes easily on nutrients, feeding, relationships and all that sort of stuff, but let's keep it basic. So orchids are just plants. I know they're a bit special, but they're just plants. So like all plants, they need food and water. Yeah? You know, whether it's out in your garden, in a fern in a pot, you know, this comes down to real basics. So let's have a think about water. How good is the water you use? These two bits of kit will help you find out. There's a TDS meter and a pH meter. One will tell you how much stuff is in your water, but not what it is, and the other one tells you how acidic your water is. Both useful. Okay, let's have a think about the water. We've got tap water, and that's not always good stuff. We've got rainwater. I use reverse osmosis water. A bit more of a chat. You could also use dirty, polluted water, and if you're not careful, your rainwater can end up like that. So, types of water, choices. If you go for an RO unit, this is a cheapo one from eBay. Water comes in on the top right, goes down through a sediment filter, along the bottom, up through a carbon filter, in through the membrane, and with a little bit of help comes out the other end as pure water. That's what I use. Now on to food, nutrients and fertilisers. This is incredibly controversial. If I ask everybody in the room what feed they use and how strong and everything, I'll get a different answer from everybody. Literally. That's why it's controversial, because everybody thinks their way's the best way. There's lots of ways. Okay, so basic fertilisers then. We all should have heard of NPK. It's marked on all the fertilisers. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. But it's worth bearing in mind the nitrogen can come in 3 forms. And those different forms are, to one degree or another, better than another. And I've got a duplicate slide. I'll get rid of that. This won't be in the final thing. I didn't notice that when I was putting this together. Oh dear, oh dear. You can't get it right all the time. Anyway, that bit won't be there. Talk amongst yourselves. What idiot. Right, nitrogen. You've got urea, ammonium and nitrate. The urea and the ammonium need nitrifying bacteria, which you find in the soil, but not necessarily in your medium. And these bacteria turn those two into nitrate. If you get one with nitrate in, it just works. It doesn't need any help. Then you get on to the secondary elements. You need these in some proportions. I can't stress how important calcium is. It needs to be there, trust me. Then magnesium and sulfur. Smaller quantities than the first three, but they need to be there. And again, emphasis on the calcium. And then you get the micro elements. Now these are there in tiny amounts, but they need to be there nonetheless. Some of them are not even fully understood, but plants don't do so well if they're not there. So whatever fertiliser you get, make sure that list is there. The micro elements are included. Okay, totally confused? Well, if you have a well-balanced fertiliser that's got all of those things in to one degree or another, you won't do too bad. But they do need to all be there in some shape or form. You can debate the proportions till the cows come home. Right, remember these gadgets, yeah? Okay, let's have a think about what we're doing with these. We put our fertiliser in our water, yeah? How much? You won't get an answer from me. I won't give you one, because everybody's got a different idea. But the TDS meter will tell us how strong our feed water is. It won't tell you what's in it, it'll tell you how strong. And the little yellow gadget, that's for pH, how acidic your water is. And this directly affects the absorption of some nutrients more than others. Yeah, some go in better at a low pH, some better at a higher pH. Yeah, Always check your pH after adding your nutrients, and you might need to fiddle with it. A cheap pH up is bicarbonate of soda, cheap pH down, citric acid. And just swing it around, go for a lower pH in one feed and a higher pH in another feed. The recommended levels are between 5.5 and 6.5. I don't go lower than 5.8. Well, that's me. You may disagree. Right, now on to some orchids. These are some of the types you'll find at shows, DIY stores, garden centres and supermarkets. What I call generally available without going to some sort of specialist. Yeah, they should just be readily available. Most should be able to grow in your home with some care and a few ifs and buts. Not included in this talk are difficult species, terrestrials, sorry, no dirt orchids, and hardy orchids, the sort you would grow outside. Let's have a talk about the humble Phalaenopsis, also known as an orchid weed, a peasant orchid, and a Phalaenopsis. And quite honestly, this is outrageous. These are perfectly good orchids, and it's where most people started, and where they may move on from. Once I had lots, now I've only got a few. And before chatting about some care, let's have a look at some that have passed by on my orchid journey. As I said, I used to have lots, now not so many. I've still got a few, a smattering, including one species. So these are some of the ones I've had. You can get mini Phalaenopsis. These are very small plants with associated small blooms. They can be delicate and beautiful. You can get the large blousier ones. They can be plain, they can be blotched, spotted, patterned, all sorts of things. You can get medium-sized plants, take up a bit more room than the minis, but nonetheless a vast array and assortment of colours. That was a nice yellow one. Then you can get the larger, almost paper-like appearance, and some lovely delicate shades in amongst those. You can also get very delicately patterned mini Phalaenopsis. You tend to sometimes get quite a lot more blooms on the minis. There's another bright and cheerful one, lovely sunny daffodil colours with an autumn colours on the lip and some delicate spotting. This one's actually got a name. This is Sweet Memory. Primary cross, this one. Extends its spike, so like a continuous blooming orchid really. It's another little mini, delicate edges to it. It almost looks like it's being backlit. As a photographer, that's an expression I use anyway. And then you can get the really large, well-shaped blooms, lovely shape to them, and an incredible assortment of patterns and colours. So I never look down on the humble Phalaenopsis. Basically, I put them on a higher shelf so that I can look up at them. But seriously, there's some smashing orchids in amongst this group, readily available and sometimes cheap as chips. Good way to start and build a collection. Right, some of the species prefer to be cool, but most of the Phalaenopsis we come across prefer up the warmer end of intermediate and on into the warm section. These are tropical orchids. They like to be warm. The mass-produced hybrids are not so fussy as some of the species, and it's basically said, if you're comfortable, then your orchids probably are as well. So if you've got your hat and coat on, it's probably too cold for your Phalaenopsis, if you see what I mean. Nice comfort zone. They like a reasonable light level. Don't take any notice of the books that say heavy shade. That's cobblers. Those books weren't written for the UK. In the UK, a reasonable light level, reasonable temperatures, reasonable humidity. Are you getting the picture? How easy going these are? There's probably no other orchid that is this easy going. It's so tolerant of the variables that can be on offer. Dry air, still air. Yeah, they're just easy going. They're so easy to look after. Right, they do need good light in this country, but they will tolerate less. Temperature, home levels are fine, but a drop at night is beneficial if you can achieve that. And a little bit of extra humidity helps them out. We do get dry air in our centrally heated homes. When you repot a Phalaenopsis, it's best done when it's in vegetative growth. The exceptions are when you've just bought it and it's in rubbish media. Just do it now. Yeah? Don't lose your roots. They like an airy mix, something like large bark or lava rock or pebbles or, something open and airy. As far as feeding is concerned, they can take relatively high levels. I'm not sure they need it. And controversially, these are nitrogen hogs. They really do. Analysis and literally scientific stuff in universities and stuff have dissected plants, and when you drop your old leaves, it's because they haven't got enough nitrogen in them. They really do guzzle the nitrogen. But beware, nitrogen needs calcium with it. Yeah? So story time. Mass-produced orchids. Come out of a flask, get potted up in a little tiny pot, community pot normally first, and then into their own individual pot, normally in some sort of sphagnum moss, normally too tightly packed as well. And that's where they stay for a while. They're grown on in perfect conditions, absolutely right light levels, high temperatures. They grow like weeds under those conditions. And then there's a lot of automation going on. They're often picked up and dumped in a bigger pot with some sort of media. And it's going to be cheap. They're not going to spend a fortune on it. And that little sphagnum plug that it was planted in, it's still there. And by now it's starting to rot. Yeah? By the time you get it, often the actual extra media that it was potted on into is also starting to break down. So you've not only lost that central core of roots in that sphagnum plug, but the rest of your roots are starting to go as well, because that media is breaking down and starting to turn acidic. Yeah, so it's quite important that when you get your plant home, get it out of the pot and have a look and see what's going on. Stick your nose in there. Does it smell like mushrooms? And if in doubt, repot it. Get rid of that sphagnum, trim off your dead roots. Hopefully there'll be some left, but sometimes there isn't. Yeah, and don't worry about your aerial roots. If they're sticking out the pot, they can stay there. They're fine. But that's important. I've seen more orchids go down through root loss through bad media from store-bought Phalaenopsis than any other reason. You're starting off on a downhill slide, so stop it as soon as you can. Get in that pot and have a nose round. Give it a good clean up if necessary. Don't worry about the spike. Unless it's got buds, you might blast them. But it's better to look after the plant. But I've repotted many in full bloom. Right, bit of a mind break there, because that was quite a lot to take in one go. And having taken a deep breath and a slurp of my water, wrong venue, then we'll move on to the Oncidiums and their intergenerics. Okay, these are not quite so easy going, but you have a huge array of colours, sizes, plants and blooms, shapes. With a bit of extra care, these can grow in the home. They're not all difficult. So, it's pretty blooms time. These are some that I've either had or still have in a lot of cases. It's just an example of the types of blooms and the shapes and the colours and the patterns. We'll have a look at some Tolumnias. These are grossly underestimated and undergrown, quite honestly. They're easy. They're small, they're compact. There's a huge range of colours and patterns. And quite honestly, with a few provisos, like don't get the roots soggy and give them good light and reasonable humidity, these are easy plants. I mean, I've got a lot of these. These are easy plants. They have a typical Oncidium shape, but the plants are far from it. They've got real fleshy, succulent leaves, but absolutely gorgeous little blooms. In all shapes, sizes and colours, although they do tend to be quite small as far as the blooms go, but they make up for it with weight of numbers. Lovely little plants. Give them a go. The next lot were once called Odontoglossums, but the old men in the white coats and the goggles have been at it again and reclassified an awful lot of them either to Oncidiums or in some cases things you can't even pronounce. but their history is important because these are the cooler growers. You give these too much heat, they will not be happy. Cooler growers with good humidity. Many names have changed, and am I bothered? Am I hell? I'm a little bit fed up with it. I understand why, but I am a bit fed up with it all. Take this one. This was once Odontoglossum crispum. It's alleged to have started the Victorian orchid growing craze, one of the earliest tropical orchids to bloom. It's now called Oncidium alexandriae. It's lost its history by changing its name and everything that went with it. This is a beautiful orchid. Mine came from McBean's when you could still go there and buy plants. I'm not sure you can. Beautiful plant. This is a strange one that I actually got from a member of the Bournemouth Orchid Society, and it was then called Odontodia devosiana. It's called something entirely different now, but a huge spike with many blooms. Another Odontoglossum now called Oncidium, Golden Rialto. Beautiful patterning, beautiful shades of yellow and cream. Gorgeous. This is one of my species. It's probably called Oncidium now, Naeviem. Has the most delicate, attractive blooms. Oh, come on. They're just gorgeous. I don't really know what this was. I think it was labelled as Sturbic or something, but it's got Odontoglossum in it. You can tell by the patterns. Lovely colours, though. And there's a whole set of Oncostelli wildcats, all with names of big cats, like this one, Cheetah. And this is probably my favourite. Okay, this next group contains a degree of black brassia in them, so there's lots of spidery nonsense in here. The brassias are the spider orchids, great big long petals and sepals, sometimes absolutely enormous. This actually got me my first ever cup at the Bournemouth Orchid Society, and it's a Masai Red-ish, might be Masai Splash. But it's an intergeneric, it's got lots of things in it. This is a really popular one. Bratonia Shelob Tolkien. A bit of a Lord of the Rings fetish there with the naming. Gorgeous colours, absolutely beautiful. And this is my special one. You'll have a job to get hold of this one. It's an Alocera, allegedly. Evening colours, the gloaming. Look at those colours, they're gorgeous. And the patterns, pink and brown. This was a Brassada, hybrid between a Brassia and an Ada, very closely related genera. Mivida it was. And this is Brassia tessa, and this epitomises the Brassias. Big spidery nonsense, gorgeous colours, masses of blooms. Really good orchid, that one. This next lot are just some of the Oncidium alliance. Some are actual Oncidiums. They're actually still called Oncidium something or other, rather than keep getting played around with. Names change faster than you can make a cup of coffee. I had to get this one, didn't I? Oncidium varicosum rogersii, variety Baldwin. And the name has totally changed, but not in my grow room, it's not. You can't not have Shari Baby. Oncidium Shari Baby with its chocolate fragrance that will fill your room. You've just got to have it. It's not an attractive bloom, but it's stunning. And then there's the Twinkles, many and varied. Tiny little blooms, but huge numbers and highly fragrant. This is a recent one that I got, Red Fantasy. I got a yellow one that actually got a first at one of the BOS shows, spring show a while back. It just happened to bloom just at the right time. That's the luck of the draw. This is an Oncostelli catatanti. Metre long blooms with 50 plus actual blooms on the spike, self-supporting, absolutely stunning colours. Highly fragrant. Miltonia, this one. Peter Comp, really strong fragrance, absolutely gorgeous. And then you've got the Miltoniopsis. Most are fragrant. These are not that easy to grow. Go steady with these. Word of warning, these are not as easy to grow. But the pansy orchids, gorgeous. Goodness knows what this is, but I just like the blooms, so I bought it. It's just unknown. The label said Orchid, and there you are, Orchid. This was labelled as a Hamiltonaria. Hamiltonaria. Goodness knows what that's made up of, but beautiful colours, gorgeous bloom. Now come on, how can you not like those colours? Stunning. The label said Cambria. I don't care. I'll have the blooms. Okay, so if that little selection doesn't sell you on the Oncidium Alliance, nothing will. A vast array of plant sizes, colours, sizes of blooms, shapes of spikes, a multitude. So looking after these in the home requires a little bit more thought than your average Phalaenopsis, but without too much additional care, these can be grown in the home, probably with the exception of the Miltoniopsis. Okay, anything that has odont in its makeup or its origins will need to be kept cooler and has a greater need for air movement. These are a little bit fussier, but having renamed them all as Oncidiums, you've lost that culture. It's just gone. So it's quite important, but it does leave us guessing. But if you get this wrong, and these will just not do so well. The Odontoglossums need good humidity and good air movement, and they need to stay cool. Generally speaking, those that are predominantly Oncidium, Brassia, Miltonia will like a bit of heat and some much better light, certainly than the Odontoglossums anyway. So these lend themselves to growing in the home. These will not do so well. Odontoglossums, Miltoniopsis and Nelliilas. I just cannot grow those flipping things. They like cooler temperatures, less light and are more dependent on good air movement and high humidity. May not be the best of selections. Some of these have unusual growth patterns. Many mature their growths in less than 12 months, like 10 months. So they don't have an annual season, an annual cycle. So they can almost bloom at any time. When the growths mature, they chuck up the spikes and they bloom. That can be any time, which is good. It's a bonus, quite honestly. Top tips. Only repot when new roots are growing. This is not always with the new growths. And choose a media to match the roots. Big, thick, fleshy roots, a chunkier area media. Very fine root system, a finer, more moisture retentive medium. But repot these when the new roots are growing. And I don't care what time of year it is. The books say in the spring, I say cobblers. Let the plant tell you. Keep the humidity higher if you can. Add in some airflow. Get a fan or two. Get a little bit of air movement. And only keep constantly moist, as the books tell you, when they are actively growing. If they're not growing, they don't need that moisture and feed. They're not growing. Surely this makes sense. So go steady with your watering. Right, before we get on to the dendrobiums, you can have a mind break, because we're going at a fair old pace here. A lot of these are not suited to growing in the home, but quite honestly, they are my favourites. Over a quarter of my 200 plus collection is dendrobiums. It's a vast genus. With some thought, some can do well in the home. The nobile hybrids, the Phalaenopsis types, and the Latorias. You may not have heard of those. So, pretty blooms time. First, the nobile types, the hybrids, not the species. There can be only one, like Highlander, and the species is not so easy, but the hybrids have had that fussiness bred out of them. So, winter rest, forget it. I've got this one. I've actually got two of these. This is Spring Dreamer pollen. Lovely pure white, lovely greeny yellow centre with pink tinges. Gorgeous one. My prima donna got a best hybrid in show at the Wessex Orchid Society. It wouldn't do it now because I've hacked it to pieces, but lovely blooms. And watch out for this one. It comes on the market now and again. This is a Kiki machine. It's not that easy to grow, and there's hardly any nobly in it, quite honestly. And this is my nobly that blooms in the summer. It doesn't follow the normal pattern. It just doesn't bloom at the right time of year. So looking after these in the home requires a bit more thought, but you have to bear in mind how they're sold. Mass produced, growth hormones and growth restrictors. Keep the plant compact and do a mass blooming so that we can sell them to us poor plebs who take them home and never see them respond like that ever again. They like to bloom late winter, early spring. And with the buds and the growths, slowly increase the watering and begin introducing some feed. Never mind what the book says, wait for the new growths. The buds need food. Don't let them drain your canes. Yeah, so as soon as you see some movement, get at it. Shortly after the bloom should be the new growth, sometimes at the same time. But look out for new root growth. This is the point where, if you need to, is the time to repot. Never mind if it's still in bloom. When you get those new roots growing, if you need to, repot. Yeah? As those new roots and growths take off, feed and water well. I can't overestimate that. Just feed and water well. And they need reasonable light in the summer. There's a reason for keeping that light level not quite as high as you might imagine. I'll explain. As autumn progresses, the canes should reach their maximum size. Only then start reducing the feed and the water frequencies. Spelt wrong. I'll fix that. Yeah. So as the plant reaches its maturity with those new canes, you can start easing off with the watering and the feed. Now comes the important bit. Yeah. During winter they shouldn't get any feed, and cool them down. Reduce that watering down to next to nothing, and the important bit is give them the brightest light possible. Now if you've actually given them less light in the summer, the change to the brightest light is more dramatic, and it will have the desired effect. So then we get back to the beginning. The buds normally appear in late winter, early spring, and off you go again. Easy, just repeat the cycle. But remember that some of the ones you buy are out of season. They're in bloom in the middle of the summer, and they may take a year or two to settle down, but that's the pattern you need. The pros of these, they've got quite large blooms, almost any colour you can think of. Some are quite fragrant, and they're quite tolerant of their environment, given that little bit of cooling down and extra bright light in the winter. But apart from that, they're pretty easy going. But the cons are they can grow pretty big. They're a bit fiddly in winter, but most are going to bloom anyway. They may not bloom as well as if they were given the real proper winter treatment, but they'll probably bloom anyway, to one degree or another. Right, there's more. There's lots of dendrobiums, and these are some of my favourites and the least popular and well known. The Latoria types, named after the place they come from. And these are easier than the Nobly types. They have very unusual blooms, often bird-like, like bird in flight, lovely patterning, veining, gorgeous little blooms, and they last forever, 2 to 3 months. This is a primary cross. The patterning on the back of this is better than on the front, but Aberrans gets in many hybrids. This is a gorgeous one. The blooms on this last for 3 months, 2 weeks. How can you ask for more? Right, Latoria types. They like to stay warm. They come from a tropical environment where they just get a wet and a dry season and the temperature doesn't change that much. They like a good even light and good humidity. A bit of air movement helps with these. They like to stay evenly moist. What a daft expression. You water it, it's soaking wet, and then it starts to dry. Stupid expression. Repot these with the new roots. They need a moisture retentive media, but for hell's sake don't let them get soggy. And if your temperatures are low, like in the winter, in my environment, allow them to dry in between watering, because they won't be growing that much because the temperatures are low. If you can keep them warm, they'll keep going. If not growing, don't feed and water very carefully. These are a bit prone to rotting about the base if they're kept wet with low temperatures. So watch what you're doing when they're not in active growth. Let the plant tell you what to do, not the books. Right, the pros: delicate blooms, gorgeous patterns, some very unusual shapes. They're mainly compact plants, but some of them can grow quite large. And quite honestly, the care is quite easily because they've got no real seasons. But watch those low temperatures in winter. Cons on these: absolutely none that I can think of. The base can be prone to rotting, but that'll be your own fault. They're not happy in low humidity, and watch your light levels. These are not high light level dendrobiums. And lastly, the Phalaenopsis types, and they're named that way because the blooms look similar to our humble Phalaenopsis that we talked about earlier. Similar, I won't say the same, but similar. I don't have many of these, but these are a couple I've got. This is just a no ID, typical sort of bloom, Phalaenopsis-like, delicate shading, fading from pink into white. This one's possibly called Polar Fire. But I've had several of these and lost a few, and the tags got muddled up, so I'm not sure. This one's definitely got a name. This is actually Thai Angel, and it's a gorgeous multi-floral type one. Absolutely stunning. The Phalaenopsis type dendrobiums like to stay warm. They like good light and good humidity. A bit of air movement helps, as with all orchids. Water and feed well when growing. When they're not growing, don't. Surely this is obvious. They're not going to use the feed and water if they're not growing much. Okay, these like to be a little cooler in winter, but that's debatable. Some say yes, some say no. For me, I allow them to almost dry if they're not in actual active growth, and always repot with new roots. If you don't, you're liable to lose your existing root system. Be careful. Pros with these: almost every colour and pattern you can think of. They can rebloom from the same canes where old spikes were, new ones can form. Some are fragrant. Quite honestly, their care is quite easy because they don't have those real seasons. Some of these can grow quite tall. They're not happy in low humidity, and you need to keep the media fresh. Repot often, but make sure you do it when the new roots are growing. They don't like stale media. And now I'm going to tease you a bit, because my thing is dendrobiums, and I've got lots, including a hell of a lot of species. Some of these are not easy to grow, but this is a teaser. I'm hoping to get some of you hooked. Now come on! This is not easy to get to bloom, but it's quite easy to grow. That got a first. Look at the depth of colour. Absolutely stunning. So long cane dendrobium takes up a bit of space. This is a Victoria Regina hybrid, Kaneko. Gorgeous colours. Look at this, Friedrichsianum. Masses and masses of blooms if you get the care right. If you don't, you won't. This is a popular one, Dendrobium hibiki. Gorgeous clusters of densely coloured blooms. This is my favourite, Dendrobium nesta. It's an anosmum cross. Smells of raspberries. And my all-time favourite dendrobium, Hercoblossom. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm totally hooked, but they're not all easy. A warning shot: just don't go randomly buying all these dendrobium species. They're not all easy, and a lot of them just won't be happy in your home. I struggle with some, but most are doing okay. Right, the environmentals then for our orchids. Temperatures between 16 and 26 is okay. A 5-degree centigrade differential at least, and this is their comfort zone for the type of orchids we've been talking about. Water quality, avoid tap water, certainly in our area. Use clean rainwater, water, and think about an RO unit, especially when you get a heat wave like we had last year and everybody runs out of rainwater. This gets round the problem. Air movement, no gales or drafts, a gentle airflow, and think about getting some fans. I use some little computer fans, they're 12 volts, just use a phone adapter thing to get 12 volts from the mains, lovely. Humidity, aim for at least 60% and maintain it across the temperatures, because it will drop down as your temperatures go up, so you'll need to up it a bit. And a few gadgets can help you judge where your humidity is, because you can't just stick your finger in the air. That's a look at some humidifiers. You might think about investing in those, but watch these, they produce cool mist. Don't get that mist blasting on your plants, it'll chill them. So let it filter gently down onto your plants, downwards. I've got several of these, they're around 35 quid on eBay and they hold 5 litres, and in the really hot weather I have to fill these up every day, and I use RO water in there. If you use tap water you'll get calcium all over your plants, so they're good stuff. These are brilliant. They're 6 or 7 quid on eBay. They give you the temperature, the humidity, and they even tell you what the time is, and they've got a minimum and maximum setting on there. They're pretty accurate, they're not bad. You can dot them around the place. Remember that orchids don't like warm, dry, still air. Most of them don't like cold, damp, still air, but some of them will absolutely love it, but they're not the ones I'm talking about today. So what other types of orchids will be okay? There are quite a few, but those environments may need to be adjusted a bit as you venture out into different types of orchids. And you can be adventurous, but you know, take care with those environmentals. The Cattleya Alliance, some are miniatures, some are absolute monsters. They need a wet dry cycle. They need to dry off in between watering, and reasonably quickly. You can get all sorts of colours in the Cattleya Alliance. These are some I've had or still have. I mean, come on, look at that colour. Masses of blooms, blooms twice a year, that one. I haven't got a clue what that one is, but those blooms are 6 inches from top to bottom. Gorgeous. I lost that one. That had fusarium. Yeah, perish the thought. But look at the colour. This is a typical blousy Cattleya with typical magenta type colours and a nice deep gold lip. Lovely little miniature. This plant is only 4 inches across, and the blooms are stunningly bright. Again, a real miniature. 4 or 5 inches for the whole plant. Beautiful. This is a nice one. A typical Cattleya shape and multifloral. This is the sort of plants we're looking at, and some of them can be quite tall. Some of them not so tall, but you can still get the colours. And some of them are tiny. This got a first at our Christmas do. Absolutely beautiful, about 6 inches across. Paphiopedilums, spelt wrong. Slipper orchids. Some have got mottled leaves, which are the ones I prefer. Some are multifloral. These like to stay moist. These shouldn't really get dry at any point. The slipper orchids. Many colours and styles, but all have a basic shape. Lots of stripy things, warts and hairy bits, and that beautiful slipper in many colours. This one I really do like. As do I like this one. I like the wings on this, I like the way it spreads. But a lot of shapes, sizes, and this one's just two-tone, just green and white. Lovely patterning, but nonetheless beautiful. If you're out and about buying, watch out for these. Miltoniopsis and Nelliilas are just fussy. They are just up the fussy end and are not the easiest things to grow, especially in the home. They both like unusual circumstances like cool, high air movement and high humidity. They're just not that easy. Why bother? They are good though. The problems with buying, the mass-produced ones, we've discussed the problems that you get with those. If you're buying on eBay, sold unseen, when it says plant like this one, try and get pictures of the actual plant. Look out for moss on the pots. It means it's been in the pot quite a long time and the chances are the media's gone. And look out for damage, bent leaves, damaged leaves, signs of any form of damage. And when you get it home, check the root system. Have a sniff and a feel. No, you can't get arrested for it, but check that media out. And if in doubt, repot it. And quite honestly, blow the blooms. Forget what the books say. The plant is what's important. And if you're going to lose your root system, do a repot. Very important. You will get other problems. You'll get bugs, mealybugs, scale, aphids. Some are easy, some are not so easy to get rid of. You might get infections and rot. If you get a soggy bit on your plant, just cut it out basically. Fusarium is a whole nother subject, quite honestly. I could talk for half an hour on that, but I suspect a lot of you have got that and don't even know it. It can be treated. Ask me afterwards. And viruses, the rarest of the problems. Don't panic. My message really is enjoy your orchids. Expect some failures. You're going to get some. But learn, learn, learn all the time and get out and about. The more orchids you see, the more you will appreciate what they're supposed to look like, and you can compare them with the ones you've got at home. And hopefully yours are doing better than some of the ones you see out and about. How many times have you got to the orchid table and thought, mine's better than that? And ask yourself, Roger's questions, are your orchids doing okay? And if the answer is yes, then great. But then ask yourself, could they be doing better? And if yes, try and find out how. Okay, thanks for listening to me waffling on. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll pause now for questions, but just remember that the coffee and the biscuits is up there, and it's not a good idea to get in the way when Roger wants his coffee and biscuits. But please ask any questions, feel free. And thanks for listening, hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully, in places, it's helped. That was the goal. Thank you. And for all you YouTube people, this is the bit where you kick in, find my spelling mistakes, give me some sensible criticism. Let's get this polished. I'm reasonably pleased with the way it's turned out, but you can help. So this is your bit now, over to you. And don't be frightened, just say what you think. And thanks for dropping by, and I'll see you next time.